Hello everyone, welcome back to Tech 411. Today we're going to be taking a look at a very cool privacy-focused web browser called the Brave browser. It's built on Chrome, so it's going to be very familiar to a lot of folks if they've used Google Chrome in the past. But this browser is going to give you the maximum protection for your privacy online. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Okay everyone, so the first thing we're going to do is open up the Brave browser here. You're going to notice right away it's very similar to Google Chrome. Now, I've already changed some of the defaults, but the first thing we're going to do is go into the settings. And when we go into the settings, you're going to see just how powerful this browser really is. So the first thing we're going to see when we go into our settings are the Get Started tab here. And in there we can change our profile name and icon. We can import bookmarks and settings. We can set Brave as the default, and we can pin Brave as well, but I've already got it pinned. We can choose the startup behavior, and we can also set what the new tab page displays. As you can see, we have the Brave dashboard selected, but we can also select our home page or just a blank page. We can also customize the new tab page. And when I click on that, it's going to take me into that area. Next, we can adjust the appearance. So we can either follow the Windows color scheme or we can use a dark or light color scheme. We can also choose themes. Now, as I said, Brave is built on Google Chrome. So when we open up this theme store, it's going to take us to the Google Chrome web store. And in here we can find all kind of themes and apps and stuff like that for Google Chrome, but they'll also work on Brave as well. Next, we can show tab groups in the bookmarks area. We can also automatically pin new tab groups created on any device to the bookmarks. Those are the defaults. I like to show the home button, and if we choose to show the home button, we also need to select what we want to show on the home button. We can either enter a custom web address or we can have it follow the new tab page. We can show the bookmarks button, and that's going to be this little button here. We can turn the news button on or off and several other things. Like for example, I like to turn off the Brave rewards. I don't use that. I don't use the Brave wallet either. And then the sidebar button I leave on, and the VPN, I don't use that. But if you use that, obviously you want to leave that on. We can choose the autocomplete suggestions that we want shown in the address bar. And by default, it's going to have all of these selected. And you can see what those are here. I'm not going to read each one of those off to you. We can use the wider address bar, and that's just going to expand the size of the address bar. And then we can choose to always show the full URL. And I actually like that option, so I'm going to leave that on. We can use vertical tabs instead, and you can see what that does. And then if we choose to use vertical tabs, we have several options that we can select below that. We can show the tab search button. We can also disable the mute function in tab speaker icons. Choose how we want the tabs to behave when we hover over them, including to show memory usage. And we can also select how inactive tabs appear. And we'll get into inactive tabs a little bit later. And the last thing we have on the appearance page is how we want to show the sidebar. And currently we have never selected. We can either use on mouse over or always, and that'll always display the sidebar. I really don't use that sidebar, so I'm going to say never. Next, we start getting into content. Now, when we go into the content section, we're going to have things like fonts, the default page zoom, and a couple of other options. We also have something called the speed reader, and this basically gives you kind of a reader mode on certain web pages. For example, online forums. it'll actually show you a page that's more friendly to reading versus the actual website itself. Some folks like this, some don't. In some cases I like it, sometimes I don't. You can always switch back and forth if you don't like the way the speed reader makes it look. Next, we're going to get into shields, and this is where we're really going to start seeing the power of the Brave web browser. Now, under shields, we're going to be able to block trackers and ads which follow you across the web. And this is really kind of like it's out and out eavesdropping. They're getting onto your browser and following you wherever you go and tracking wherever you go. And these shields are going to help protect your privacy. Here we can show the number of items blocked on the shields icon. Now, the shields icon is this Brave icon up here. And if you're on a website, it'll show you how many trackers are blocked. And you can actually click up here. From time to time, it will break some function of a website. Doesn't happen often, but it does happen. And when it does, you can take your shields down temporarily by clicking up on this icon up here. Now, I typically use it with just the standard tracker and ad blocking. You do have an aggressive setting and then a disabled setting. Upgrade connection to HTTPS. We have 3 different options: standard, strict, and disabled. Standard is what I have selected. We can block scripts, which we don't currently have those blocked, but what we do have is fingerprinting blocked. And that is, I'll put a link down in the video description to explain what fingerprinting is, but fingerprinting, very generally speaking, is a way to identify you specifically. And I don't like that. You probably don't like that. So I highly recommend you leave that on. But again, down in the video description, you can do some additional reading on browser fingerprinting. It's going to block third-party cookies. You can turn an option on that forgets you when you close out of a website. Now, if you do this on some sites, like for example, your banking site and things like that, they won't remember you and you'll have to go through all the additional verification every time you access it. But you can turn that on and it will clear everything when you close out of a site. And then this here is to store contact information for future broken site reports. You can turn that on or off. And then we can get into content filtering. Now, these are the defaults, but you can go in here and enable a bunch of different content filters. You can see, if I view the full list here, all these different content filters that are on here. Really a lot of different options. You can also add custom filter lists and create custom filters as well. So Brave is very, very powerful in this area as far as content filtering. The last thing we have down here is social media blocking. And these are the defaults. This is how it's going to come by default. I typically allow LinkedIn embedded posts, but by default that is off. You can also allow Facebook logins and embedded posts, and allow X logins and embedded tweets. These are embedded posts from Facebook or from X that are embedded into another website. And so that's going to either allow that functionality or disable that. Next, we have privacy and security. And under privacy and security, this is going to be very familiar to you if you've used Google Chrome before. The first thing you can do is delete browsing data. And it's all the typical options in here: the time range that you want to delete, what you want to delete. And note, folks, that if you're deleting cookies and other site data, that will log you out of your banking sites and any other sites that you've logged into, and you'll have to go through the login and verification process over again. So just be aware of that before you hit that button. That's the basic, and then you have the advanced here. The thing that you have on Brave that you don't have on Google Chrome is you can set it to clean browsing data when you close or exit the browser. And I really like this. So I always set it to clean the cached images and files, because I found that a lot of times when the browser is acting flaky, it's usually meaning that you have to clear the cache. And that's 9 times out of 10, that's how I fix my problems with a browser that's not acting right. And By doing this every time you exit the browser, it's a very easy way to perform the maintenance and prevent from having a problem in the first place. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Next, if we go under security, we have standard protection. This tells you exactly what it does. It uses Google Safe browsing. You can turn that off if you don't want it to use that. What I do recommend that you leave on is secure DNS. Now you can choose the OS default, which is the default, or you can choose to add a custom DNS service provider. And lastly, you can choose from one of the pre-populated options here, like Google, Cloudflare, clean browsing, etc. I'm just going to leave it on the OS default. And in here you can manage V8 security. Okay, it tells you what this is. I'm not going to get too much into that. You can manage linked devices. We'll get into sync in a minute. But you can manage the devices that you're syncing with in here under security. And you can also manage your certificates. And this actually takes you to another setting. Next, we get into site shields and settings. And we can go into the shield status, and we can customize behaviors for the shields. So if we want the shields to go down anytime we visit a site, we can add that site here. If we want the shields to always be up, we add them down here. Next, we have the permissions. This is going to be very similar to Chrome. I recommend that you come in here and check this out once in a while. This is going to have things like access to your location, access to your camera, access to your microphone, and access to notifications. Now under location, for example, you can choose the default behavior, and you can set customized behaviors in here as well. And it's going to be the same thing for your camera, your microphone, and so on and so forth. Then you have some additional settings as well, like cookies, images. For example, images. If you don't want the sites to show any images at all for some reason, you can come in here and turn that off. Pop-ups and redirects, and additional content settings. This is useful if you don't want sites to be able to play any sound. You can come in here and turn that off. So very customizable in here. Next, we have the WebRTC IP handling policy. I will post a link down in the video description explaining what WebRTC is. That's going to be a little beyond the scope of this video where we're just going over the Brave browser. But I recommend you go down there, read that link for more information. We can choose whether or not we want to use Google services for push messaging. We have some auto redirects and so on and so forth. I usually always like to send a do not track request with my traffic. One of the other great things about Brave is you have the option to increase your anonymity with the Tor network. With this setting, you can turn that functionality on or off. And what that's going to do is if I go over here, when I have it on, it allows me to do an in private window. If you're a Chrome user, you'll know this as incognito. And also we have the additional option to do a new in private window with Tor protection. And if we turn that option off, it just takes away the Tor option. .onion is used to resolve things on the Tor network. And so that's a setting there. As far as bridges and volunteering to help others, those are optional things that you can choose to opt into if you'd like. Next, we have data collection. I typically will leave the diagnostic reports on, but the other stuff I don't want to be sending any data. Web3. So this is things like the wallet and Web3 domains. We're not using the Brave wallet, so I'm not going to really get into that. This is the Leo AI. So we can choose whether or not we want to show the icon in the sidebar. And we can add large language models in here as well. The next option we have is sync. So with Brave, the sync does not work like it works with Chrome, where it connects up to your Google account and stores the information on a server. With Brave, you could create what's called a sync chain, and that's where it basically daisy chains all of your devices together, and they all synchronize with one another. And if you're starting a new chain, you're going to click on this here, and I'm going to say start a new chain. If you already have Brave on another device, you can choose I already have a sync code. But we're going to say start a new chain, and it's going to ask us to choose the type of device we want to sync to. I'm just going to say another computer. And then what it's going to do is it's going to show us our sync chain code, and we're going to want to copy this. We can also view the QR code as well from here. And then what that all allows us to do is connect all of our other devices up so we can synchronize settings and bookmarks and all that fun stuff across our devices. Now, the great thing about this is it does not store data on Google servers. It stores the data on your devices only and uses all your devices for replication. I'll post a link down in the video description to more technical details on how the Brave sync chain works. But that's a really general, high-level description of how it works. So we're going to click OK here. And after you set up the synchronization, you can choose what you want to synchronize. Now, by default, it's only going to synchronize your bookmarks, but you can choose to synchronize all these different things individually, or you can just say, you know what, sync everything. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave bookmarks selected. The last two things you can do here at the bottom, obviously, are you can leave the sync chain, or you can completely delete the sync account. The next item on the left here is the search engine, and the default is going to be Brave. You can change that, obviously, and use a different search engine. Same thing for your private windows. Maybe in your normal window, you want to use a different search engine than what you use in your private windows. You can do that here in Brave, which is pretty cool. We can choose whether or not we want to show search suggestions. We can also index other search engines. And then the last thing we can do is manage all the search engines. Next, we have our extensions, and we can allow Google login for extensions. We don't have that enabled. Media router. This is the cast feature in the browser. WebTorrent. Wildvine, this is like for DRM, digital rights management. This is going to be for like streaming video and streaming audio. And the next thing we can do over here is set up autofill and passwords. Now, I use a different password manager, so I never like to store payment methods or passwords within the browser. I just don't like to do that, but you do have the capability to do that in here with Brave. One thing you can do in here is store your addresses, any addresses that you enter, for easy filling later, but that's also able to be turned off as well. Languages, obviously, if you want to add additional languages, this is where you're going to come in and configure spell check. You can customize spell check by adding words. We have Brave Translate, and we can add languages that we want to auto-translate. And under downloads, we have the same thing we're going to have in a Google Chrome browser. Location where we want to store the downloads. I always like to ask where to save each file before it actually does the download. And then whether or not we want to show downloads when they're done. Next thing we have in here is our system settings. Kind of similar to Chrome again. This is going to continue to run applications in the background when the browser is closed. The setting is enabled by default, and I recommend you leave it that way unless you have a good reason not to. Graphics acceleration, that should always be enabled. You can disable it as a troubleshooting mechanism, but chances are if you have to disable the graphics acceleration, there's something going on with your system. But you can disable that for troubleshooting purposes. Close window when closing the last tab. So this, if I go up here and close this last tab, it'll close the entire window out. Warning you before closing windows with multiple tabs, show full screen reminder, press escape to exit. In here, we can also turn the Brave VPN on or off. The last thing that you definitely want to turn on, especially if you're like me and you have a million tabs open all at once, is the memory saver. And I'll turn this on and I'll put it in the balanced setting, or maybe in the maximum setting. And this tells you what each one of those does. What this is going to do, every time you have a tab open in your browser, it's taking more and more of the memory from your device. And what this allows you to do is the browser will say, okay, this tab hasn't been used for X amount of minutes. I'm going to hibernate this tab, free up that memory so that the system overall can run a little bit faster. And that's where you'll see that dotted line around the tab, is when that tab has been put to sleep, basically. And you can add sites down here. If you have this enabled, you can add sites to exclude from the memory saver if it causes problems. And absolutely last thing you can do down here, if the browser is not working correctly and you're not able to get it working correctly, you can reset everything to their defaults. So the last thing I'm going to show you here is what happens when we visit a site. So let's go to a site, let's go to Facebook. Now when we go to Facebook at the login page, we can click the Brave icon up here and we can look at the status of our shields, and we can look and see how many trackers, ads, and more were blocked. So I'm not showing anything for Facebook, at least for the login page. So let's try something like CBS.com. And here we can see that it wants to know our location. And I really like how these permissions come up, because it's going to ask to remember my decision. So if I choose allow, by default, it's just going to remember it until I close out of this website. But I can choose additional options here between 24 hours and obviously forever if you wanted to always be able to access your location. So I'm just going to say allow to allow them to access my location. We can see that it's not really blocking any ads or trackers on this website. Let's go to another website. Yeah, this is one I knew I was going to, and a lot of this may be blurred out, folks. Now, what I'm on is CNN.com, and it wants to install Google Wildvine. It's a digital rights management option we were talking about earlier. We can allow this. This is a legitimate news site, so we're going to say allow. But if we click up here on the Brave button, we can see that 27 trackers, ads, and more were blocked. The shields are up. I can click on Advanced Controls, and this is going to allow me to fine-tune this even further. And if I choose block scripts, we can see that 3 scripts were blocked. And I can also say, forget me when I close this site. So really cool how you can customize your privacy here in Brave. And you can clearly see how Brave is protecting your privacy when you click on the Shields icon up here. The other thing I can do is I can easily add a bookmark by clicking over here. The side panel, when that comes up, I have the prompt here for Leo AI, if I want to use the AI. Brave also has something called Brave Talk. I haven't used that, but it looks to be some type of chat feature. All your bookmarks, a reading list. So this is really cool if you are on different websites and you want to create a reading list. You can create a reading list here. Add the tab in here and then come back and read through everything when you're in the mood to read. So that's basically what that does. And when we click on the icon here, we have some additional things that we can do. This is the last thing I'm going to go over. Obviously, we have the About and report a broken site features here under help. We were already all through the settings. If we go under more tools, we can add a new profile. We can open a guest profile. We can synchronize, and we can do some additional things here as well. Save and share. We have a bunch of different options for sharing, saving the page and casting the page. Find and edit. Print. Obviously we can control the zoom in and zoom out. We can go into full screen mode, delete browsing data. We can manage our extensions from here, just like Google Chrome. Our downloads, bookmarks and lists, our history. So we can come right in there and access our history. And we have some of the other things in here as well. So really a very good browser, very privacy focused, and I believe more secure and private than Google Chrome. What do you think about the Brave browser? Let us know down in the comments section. As always, remember to like. It helps others find our content just a little bit easier on YouTube, and we do appreciate it. Click on subscribe, and when you do, click that bell and you'll be notified anytime we add new content. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.